Hey guys, greetings and salutations. James here. I'm actually back at Wilderness Park here in the city of Downey, California. So it's not too far from my house, so it's very convenient. I actually wanted to talk about the idea of talking white. Talking white. I think that I grew up in the Baldwin Hills area, sort of the hood, you know, it would be considered the hood, you know. And, you know, it was really interesting growing up because you know, over the years of me being, you know, a child, all the way up to like my teenage age, and even just my early adulthood, you know, maybe my early 20s, you know, late teens, I remember being asked, why did I talk white in my community? By many of the people in the black and brown community, Latino, you know, black Americans. A lot of people approached me and was like, why you talk white? Do you hang out with white friends, you know? And at the time, I didn't really have any friends from other cultures. It was mostly just people that were, you know, within the black and brown community. What was interesting is that I never asked my mother or my family, why did I speak or enunciate my words the way that I do, you know? And I remember in my community, it wasn't everyone, but there were a lot of people that actually made fun of me simply because I didn't have an accent, or maybe I didn't use slang, or I didn't use ebonics. And to some extent, I actually started to feel a little bothered by it, because it didn't make me feel like I was a part of the community. Not really, you know. I felt like I was locked out, you know. I even had some ladies within my community that really kind of, you know, rejected me because I didn't talk like the other guys. I didn't behave like the other guys. And I actually seen myself as you know, at a disadvantage in my community. So it was really difficult for me to really kind of deal with that, you know, and I didn't really have any answers from anyone. What was interesting to me is, I'm gonna say, during the time of my late teens, early 20s, I started to actually work for the first time, you know, at a legit job. You know, I worked at a school with children with special needs, and I really enjoyed it. But I noticed that the parents and the children and my colleagues really respected the way that I communicated. They really enjoyed the way that I enunciated my words. And I was a little confused because for so many years I was made fun of for speaking a certain way. But then I was trying to figure out, well, why were they responding well? And I started noticing the more I started to work, and I went to different jobs, you know, especially working with children in academia, you know, within that framework, working with children in education, things like that, the more I was approached, and people would ask me, well, James, what school did you go to? Do you have your associates? Do you have your masters? Do you have your bachelors? You know, I've even had people ask me and approach me and say, well, you know, are you some type of teacher? You know, are you a pastor? You know, are you somebody, you know, who's very educated? And, you know, still to this day, you know, I'm going to be, you know, 40 later this year. But, I've, you know, started out going to school, but, you know, I never really finished or anything like that. I realized that it wasn't really for me, at least not at that time period. So maybe I might go back. But what's interesting is the way that I communicated, it really influenced people, and they realized, like, okay, this guy has some knowledge. Look at the way he, you know, uses his words. You know, even one of my older sisters, you know, she jokingly says that, you know, I'm a linguist. You know, somebody who likes to use language, you know, the context of language, the different parameters of language, you know. And I do appreciate that acknowledgement, because I do take communication with people very seriously. What's interesting to me, though, and I would like to get back to the story, but I want to give some background here. My mother, actually, who's in her early 80s, actually, you know, so God has actually privileged her with the opportunity to be, you know, an elderly woman. And she's still, to this day, a very good communicator. You know, she has some hearing challenges, but very good communicator. In fact, she's so good at communicating that she's learned how to lip read, you know, on her own, you know, and she's even been going on YouTube and learning how to do sign language. So that's how effective my mother is when it comes to communication. She's very effective, you know. So what's interesting to me is she shared with me a long time ago, when she was a younger woman and she came to California from Louisiana, that she actually worked in Beverly Hills as a cook. And during the time that she was cooking, and she would prepare these children, you know, their meals and things like that, and for the staff, you know, she was, you know, a black cook at this nice school in Beverly Hills. And she explained to me that the staff collectively started to realize that she was not in the best relationship, you know, at the time with a man, that she was with. You know, the guy's not my father, but you know, it was somebody that she was with, and you know, he really used a lot of the I don't know, a lot of different methods to sort of really just oppress her. You know, he really used his domineering attitude at the time to really restrict her from speaking her mind and things like that. She even shared with me that at that time, anytime she made a paycheck or something, she just handed it over to him. That was the routine that she was trapped into. What's interesting is the staff there, an all white Caucasian staff, you know, people who were, you know, went to school to be, you know, be therapists, people who were, you know, went to school, you know, educated staff. They took the time to actually start working with her without her knowing, to really challenge her, or I'm going to say to educate her, how to communicate more effectively. They didn't tell her, but they gradually started to, they would alternate with one another to speak to her just for 40 minutes or an hour regularly. And then they noticed that she was very sensitive. She started to cry every time she had a disagreement with someone, or maybe she would get really sentimental or sad anytime somebody misunderstood what she was saying. And so they would learn that, and then they would teach her how to utilize language to communicate those frustrations, or how to correct people properly. And over time, they kept training her up at the point where she was actually ready to actually stand forth and against the person that you know, was really taking advantage of her at the time, you know, her partner. And the partner was so upset, the partner was so devastated that she started to stand up for herself, that he actually did something crazy and actually burned down the house that he bought her. He burned it down. But what I love about my mother's story is that she stopped being a victim. Yes, she lost that house, but she became someone else, someone that was prepared to take on anyone when it comes to language. And still an 80-year-old woman, she does a very good job with communicating, and she's very wise when it comes to effectively communicating ideas that, you know, she wants to express. And so that's something that she passed along with all her children, you know, even the children that she adopted, you know. So that's one thing I really love about the dynamic of my family, is although we all have very different paths, we all are very good, effective communicators. I have a brother in the Navy who I'm very proud of, and he communicates very well. I try my best to communicate very well. I get acknowledged for that. I appreciate that. I'm noticing that a lot of my friends and the people that I attract are also effective communicators. You know, they see somebody that they can, you know, resonate with, that they can connect with. But you know, but it's all my family members, nephews, nieces. We all have this great approach to communicate. Even if we're completely different, we all communicate fairly well. I will say that over the years, I've found myself in a lot of different discussions when it comes to faith, when it comes to philosophy, and even more recently, politics within the last 2-3 years. And I've noticed that this tool that I have to effectively communicate has been incredibly, incredibly beneficial. I have to say that at first I thought I was at a disadvantage, and now I've learned that I am at an advantage, regardless of whom I'm speaking to. It could be someone with, you know, an education that's, you know, very profound and, you know, this prestige, or it could be business owners or entrepreneurs, or it could be philosophers or people who study religions or history. But I find myself that because I can communicate, I have the foundation to communicate effectively, regardless of to whom I'm speaking to. And I feel like it's been one of the greatest tools, or the greatest gifts my mother has offered me and my family. Over the years, I've reflected, maybe the last 20+ years of working with children, you know, with sports and other educational avenues. I've learned that there are a lot of people that have approached me, and they always ask, why do you have this great attitude, Teacher James or Coach James, or, you know, where did you learn, you know, how to speak properly, or how did you learn to, you know. And I realized that all these doors started opening for me just based on the way that I communicate, just on the base that I can speak properly, you know, and not rely on slang or broken, you know, ebonics and language to communicate, you know. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that everyone that, you know, doesn't speak properly is, you know, then unproductive or something like that, but there are doors, without dispute, that will open when you can properly communicate. There are more doors that open for you, regardless of your culture, regardless of your educational background. If you can communicate effectively, a lot of different doors can open, and it's just been a wonderful, wonderful tool that I really appreciate. the last 20 plus years I've had the privilege of working with all sorts of people in the educational field, in different fields, simply because they enjoy the way that I communicate, not only with children, but other adults and my colleagues and our clients. You know, it's just something that I realized that I'm really thankful for. So when people say, well, hey James, you're talking white, you know, I don't see it as talking white, I see it as talking properly. And I think my mother, and I think definitely the people that took the time to actually aid my mother when it came to effective communication, because that is, I can see even now, it's opened so many doors. Even today, it's opening doors for me. I'm meeting some amazing people simply because they can understand how I'm communicating. I also learned that when it comes to communicating with people from other cultures, you know, and maybe English is not their second language, I've learned how to properly communicate with people, you know, even just trying to learn the basics of other languages, you know. I may want to say, well, hey, you know, good morning, how are you doing, you know, in German. And I can say, hey, you know, guten Morgen, wie geht's es dir, you know. Or I may want to say, hey, you know, good afternoon in Spanish. And I may say, you know, hey, habla español, you know, how are you doing, you know, do you speak, do you speak English? Or, you know, I learned to take the time to just learn how to just learn, you know, just other languages, at least phrases, just to communicate more effectively with people, you know. I've even actually learned a little bit of sign language from my mother, you know, thank God for her heart, you know, to share this, you know, tool with me. But I guess what I really want to say is it's really important to properly learn to communicate. In fact, if God ever gives me the opportunity to have children, I'm going to make sure that I'm reading to my children at a very young age and communicate with them regularly. In fact, that's something that my mother actually shared when she was an in-home babysitter for a lot of families that, you know, have a Jewish background or maybe white Caucasian background. You know, when she was growing up in, you know, the early days of here being in California, is she would be an in-home babysitter, and she's seen that the families allowed their children to communicate openly with one another, even if the children were saying something that the mother, you know, or the father didn't really care for. They allowed the children to speak their mind. And so my mother, what she did was, as she had children, she allowed us to do the same. And I see now, looking back in retrospect, that it benefited our whole family. So thank you, Mom, for giving me this great tool. And I just want to shout out to all those people that may be going through some challenges and issues within the Black and brown or any other community that, you know, you're being accused of talking white or whatever else. That there is no such thing as talking white. It's just communication. There's just a clear way to be professional, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being an effective communicator, regardless of your skin tone, your melanin count, or anything else. Guys, God bless you, and thank you for listening to my little rant. All right, take care, and God bless you guys. Peace.